the Spiritual Crisis Network training for volunteers to become email responders. So, a bit about the Spiritual Crisis Network. It was founded in 2005, and I'm Isabel Clarke. I was there from the start, but it was actually Catherine Lucas was our leader at that point in time. And she just organized a series of fantastic conferences on revisioning mental health. And it was at the end of one of those that we decided that we really needed a spiritual crisis network in the UK. And in the early years, we had some legal experts as part of our core group, and they set up a legal framework, a company limited by guarantee. We'd love to be a charity, and we keep looking at it, but it needs more of a sort of admin resource and stuff than we've got currently. But we set up a website, and the website quickly necessitated an email response system because people in crisis came to us through the contact facility on the website, and it was important for us to respond to their emails with really good quality responses. And so we set up training for volunteers, which is what you're taking part in. And we also started up with peer groups in geographical areas. And for many years, these were sort of small and met in person. But with the pandemic, they've gone onto Zoom, and this has meant that we can open up our peer group to people anywhere, and this has become a fantastic new support possibility for people in crisis. So we're delighted that you're interested in this. We need you as responders, first of all, to the emails, but also as fundraisers and spreaders of the word and all sorts of other things. So, what do we mean by spiritual crisis? Definition that we use, where spiritual journeying beyond consensual reality meets the sort of experience that can get labeled as psychotic. Now, a lot of you will have come across the work of the Groffs, who did brilliant work writing about this area and exploring it. And they came up with the terms spiritual emergence, for when it's all fairly straightforward, and spiritual emergency, when it's a crisis. R.D. Laing tackled it, and he's been an ambiguous figure because it's where people maybe don't want to look at this area of experience in this way because he was a bit irresponsible, etc. It's made it easier to dismiss him, but his works are very interesting and well worth looking at. And it comes in all sorts and sizes. There's Kundalini, the energy rising up the body to the crown chakra, people hearing voices, out of the body experiences, psychic experiences, experiences of extreme alienation and fear. It goes on and on. We do not draw a boundary in the Spiritual Crisis Network around it. If somebody comes to us and they reckon that we are an appropriate person to approach, and they see whatever it is they're going through as a spiritual crisis, we take it from there. But we do need to have a bit of a sense of what might be going on here. And a simple way of looking at it is as follows. People can sometimes find themselves catapulted into another sort of reality. A door seems to open and land them there, and it's all different. And so they've kind of crossed a threshold. Now, the best way to get a handle on this is not to go to prose words, well, books and books have been written about it, but to consult the real experts, the artists, the poets, and the mad people, the people that have experienced it and know about it. And I'm starting with an artist from the 9th century, because I studied medieval history once upon a time, a long time ago, which I think gives a bit of a sense of what it might feel like, that other sort of reality. And now I'm going to read a favorite poem by Rumi. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Where is the door? There are no walls around me. I won't go back to sleep. And that's the 13th century poet, Persian poet Rumi, who knew a thing or two about it. So this is about an area of experience, and words are not terribly helpful, or they can actually be quite misleading. But let's look at what we know about that area of experience. Can be, very often it's characterized that everything feels incredibly meaningful. But what on earth does it mean? Where is the door? There are no walls around me. Things merge, boundaries dissolve. And here I'm calling on Blake, a nice picture of merging and dissolving. Another feeling, another experience is that everything is suddenly connected. Synchronicities abound. Metaphors can come to life. And there's a sense of significance, cosmic significance. Everything is terrible or wonderful. And confusion about the self. You've stepped, if you're in this place, you've stepped beyond the boundaries of your individual self into another realm. And again, we've got Blake and a photograph that you could almost see like Blake's dragon. And with the confusion about the self, here's the two aspects of the goddess, Parvati and Durga, the wonderful and the terrible. So a sense of threat, and it's, mind you, it's got to be cosmic threat, is something that you find in this area. And there is a link there with personal trauma that people have gone through. People who have been through terrible things. Their access to that doorsill, to the ability to cross that threshold, is loosened. It's also finding yourself in this place is linked to major life changes and transitions. And here's a nice picture from Blake of cosmic threat. So I'm a psychologist, and I've tried to look into what might be going on here in the simplest possible way with the least possible assumptions. And what I've come up with is that as human beings, we have got these two distinct ways of experiencing, which I've just illustrated with the pictures and the poem and that sort of thing. And that's because our brains have two distinct wiring circuits. Mostly they work together. We're in consensual reality and feel in control. Everything's ordinary. And I call that shared reality. It's on this side of the threshold, but. So this is a diagram that I think is helpful for understanding it. I've borrowed this from a therapy I use, dialectical behavior therapy. And one of those, it shows the two circuits in the brain, the two ways the brain is wired up. This is the emotional one that looks after relationships and feelings and everything that's important for us. And this is the verbal, reasonable, logical one that kind of knows more precisely what's going on. Most of the time, these two are working together, and we're in an ordinary thinking place, and we know what we feel, but we also know how we think. And they've got separate memories. And the memory here is the one that holds memory for things like threat in the past. And this one knows the dates and the times. But, you know, when this is all joined up, that's absolutely fine, because they talk to each other and put the information together. But at high and low arousal, when we are in a state, when we feel under threat, when things are difficult, or when we're kind of drifting or in a different state, these two separate out. And then we lose that reasonable, logical bit, and we're left with the emotional one, which opens us up to other ways of experience, unbolts us from the limitations of our individuality, but lands us with those memories that might be quite difficult to deal with without the dimension of time. So when those two states of mind drift apart, as I say, they're less connected at states of high and at low arousal. And if you don't believe me, think about a time when you've been late for something and you suddenly find you can't find your keys. How easy is it to think coolly, now where did I see them last? They loosen when we meditate. And also when we're in a truly creative state, in the flow, and in all sorts of situations. Taking substances will separate them. And that's people want sometimes a bit of a holiday from their relentlessly logical mind. But lack of sleep and lack of food will also separate them, as will extreme isolation. So that begins to give us the first clue to the sort of things that we in the Spiritual Crisis Network see as absolutely central to getting people back into a situation where they can navigate their own lives. And that is grounding, getting in touch with the physical reality now, and mindful activity in the present. That will bring them back together. But of course, very often when people have drifted off into this other state, they think they are in ordinary reality. They think that's how it is. So actually having a bit of a checklist to be able to recognize where you might be is quite important. So the ordinary everyday feels ordinary. There are clear limits, access to full memory and learning. Precise meanings are available. There's separation between people, a clear sense of self. On a good day, emotions are moderated and grounded. And this way of being is governed by a logic of either or. The other, across the threshold, feels supernatural and super special, numinous. It's got a sort of glow. Boundaries dissolve in this place. Access to propositional knowledge and memory, precision is patchy. But everything can feel suffused with meaning or completely meaningless. This is a place of paradox. The self can be lost in the whole or feel supremely important, a mission. Emotions can swing between extremes or be completely absent because this state is governed by a logic of both and. And all this can be extremely confusing, hence the crisis. So ability to cross this threshold, which can, of course, in the short term, be amazing, wonderful, mystical experiences. But it can be a vulnerability to really quite dangerous crisis. It's easier for some people than for others, and there's a whole realm of study about this. Highly creative, spiritual and psychic people all have this gift. Earlier trauma makes the threshold looser, as I've mentioned. High stress, low stimulation, lack of sleep, food, and human company all contribute to vulnerability. But of course, in a way, if you think about the regime in a monastery, a lot of those, silent monastery or something, all of those will be there in order to aid contemplation. Substance use, which can be in religious ritual, whether it's ayahuasca or the sort of tokenistic use of wine in Anglicanism, which is my practice, and substance abuse can all play a part. So, psychosis. I've been talking about spiritual experience, mystical experience, and psychosis all together, and I've been lumping them together because that's how I see it. They're all ways in which people can encounter this state that comes about when those two circles separate. But there has been this recognition that even when it's given that diagnosis, there is potential for transformation there. Traditions such as psychosynthesis and spiritual emergency recognize that transformational potential of crossing the threshold. They tend to distinguish between psychosis and transformational crises, but more and more this is seen as a false dichotomy, and the Spiritual Crisis Network does not make that distinction. One of the people who's researched, there's a lot of research in this area, has researched this area, suggests that people very often cross that threshold in order to solve a problem when their life has got stuck, when they've come to a bit of a full stop and they need to develop and to grow. But there are things that can keep them more permanently stuck if they get the wrong messages and they become hopeless. Isolation and stigma can keep people stuck. They need the right support to navigate the crisis successfully. They need hope that it can be that transformational, creative way forward. And that's what we are trying to do in the Spiritual Crisis Network. So we are helping people to manage the threshold safely and go forwards rather than get stuck. So starting off, just awareness of that possibility, of that vulnerability, of the fact that the person who comes to us in crisis will be open to that unshared experience, and they need to be able to manage it. And they can do that by grounding when the experience is overwhelming, when it's taking over, when things are getting dangerous. Grounding activity, grounding food, being in the physical present. And mindfulness, simple grounding mindfulness is the base tool to manage that. And sometimes people actually don't want to do that because they do have to face the fact they are going to ground themselves in the present. They've got to actually look at what they're experiencing in the face. And if it's very frightening, that takes a lot of courage. And actually, if it's very wonderful and they want the world to be entirely like this, it also takes courage to face the fact that it might not be the whole story. And remember that those two circles separate at states of high and low arousal. So managing arousal is another absolutely basic central tool to be in control. Breathing, long, slow out breath breathing, and mindful activity in the present. So those are the things that the Spiritual Crisis Network suggest, and that if you become an email responder, which I hope you will be talking to people about over email. Because people in crisis can cut themselves off from others, and this can push them further into crisis. They can go further and further into their own world, and they need to connect up to be able to make use of this, to live fuller lives. They need to spend time with people around them, focusing on ordinary things, even if they don't feel like it. They also need to help to make sense of their experiences in a non-stigmatizing way. This is very important, because if you tell somebody that what they've got is a horrible illness and they'll never be able to do any of the things that they thought they would, and they've got to take the rest of their life, they've got to take medication that's going to stop them from being able to access their full faculties, this is obviously going to be massively discouraging. They might need, if things are dangerous, they might need to go into the services who will tell them that. But we balance that by saying, okay, once you've got through the crisis and you come out, you can take charge and manage it in a different way. You need to keep yourself safe sometimes in the height of the crisis, because there can be real danger. So this is where SCN comes in, and the Zoom peer groups that have grown out of the face-to-face local groups is a great new resource for that, where people can meet up with, they can talk to people who've done this journey. Very often people who've been into hospital, who've taken the medication, but have got themselves free, have gradually got themselves off it, and have recognized that the things they learned, their ability to cross the threshold, is actually a positive in their lives. So a few books. Obviously put my books in there. This one, Madness, Mystery and the Survival of God, is really readable. That one's got all the research. Groff, that's the classic text. This is Catherine Lucas's classic book, who founded our Spiritual Crisis Network. And Katie Mottram was somebody who did fantastic work with us and is still working in this field. And this is our website, which has got all the resources on it. Can you stop? Yeah, stop.